this kind of new or emerging role of like cloud architect, like is that who's responsible for this? Who do you think should be who owns this problem at an organization?
So I think you nailed it right on the head, which is it's the cloud architect, you know. He's coming on board and he needs to understand all of the different requirements, security requirements, you know, development requirements, business requirements, compliance requirements. How do you gather all of these different requirements and then build a roadmap to go cloud native, meeting all of the requirements in a cost effective and fast way? How do you do that, you know? And it's almost impossible. And that was my role when I first thought about Sigberis. You know, I was a cloud
Wow.
security architect as well, and I needed to meet all these check boxes and scale and be secure and guarantee truly security through scale, and in the velocity. And so the cloud security architect, which is a very, very, very hard role to fill in today's world, is the person responsible to governing your cloud as you scale in a very fast way. And that is the challenge here, which is speed and security. How can we accomplish that?
Yeah, totally. And I've seen, from my experience, there's people who, let's say, understand the technology well, and the risks and all of that. And then, there's people that are good at managing, teams. But I find one of the things that's most difficult is how do you represent what's going on? Like, what are the KPIs? What are the explanation of what's going on to the CEO, to the board, to the people that are non-technical that have to understand what's emerging and where money needs to be spent? Like, how do you do that part of it? Like, what's the best advice for someone that needs to explain what's going on?
Yeah, so for us is everything. It's a multi-layer approach to solving that problem, right? And we call that kind of just risk communication. How do you communicate risk is one thing, and how do you assess risk is something completely different. And everything starts at understanding your context of risk. Like, what is risk to you? What kind of data do you have? How do you classify your data? How do you classify your incidents on that data, right? So we work with enterprises to truly help them discover this based on their maturity level. Multiple organizations are have different ways of doing this, but for us, not only we provide software, but we provide a consultative approach to the problem where we help enterprises discover that, and
Right.
through automation, it's possible, and we do have technology that can help you assess risk in real time according to your data classification, according to your environment, and also to communicate risk. And but risk is such a vague umbrella word. It comes down to the impact of something not being available, the impact of something, of a data breach, and then just focusing on those gems, on the gold, like where is the crown jewels, and then build policy around crown jewels.
So, like, if you could speak directly to every like CISO, enterprise CISO in America or the world, what is it you think that they need to hear right now? Like, what's the one thing that people need to reapproach?
Um, well, to be completely honest, the first thing they need to hear is like, we know there's a problem. We acknowledge your frustration, but the solution is to embrace innovation. Embrace innovation around the cloud native foundation. Like, what are how are there's multiple teams out there building amazing technology to help solve this problem. It needs to embrace innovation, to go to the startups and be able to give them opportunity to bring a solution, of one of a kind solutions. Not CISOs don't have to go to the legacy companies and the legacy brands. I think CISOs should be open for innovation, open to innovate with new companies, and upfront face the challenges and be able to tackle challenge one at a time. So to be completely honest, regardless of the solution, I think the big thing is CISOs, there's a problem, embrace innovation as part of the solution. And this is my number one um, advice here.
Yeah, I think that that's true. I think that's definitely, you know, encouraged and needs to happen. I'm curious, like, um, you know, the idea of, like you mentioned, like policy approach or like policy first approach, like what's the difference between a policy first approach versus like a developer first approach, and why does that matter? Like, why is one better than the other?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Amir. And I think one big thing is to look back and understand, who is in charge of the problem. And we believe that the person responsible to solve the problem is the business. And from a business perspective, and this can be in the form of a CISO, cloud security architect, information security leader, they think policy first. They think that we have this requirement, we have this policy, and we can push it down to the developers. Now, that's called the top down approach. If you implement a bottom up approach, which starts at the developer doesn't have the right business context to make a decision. He doesn't know this data is more important than this other data. He doesn't understand the likelihood of that data being impacted. That's the first problem. So for the last 25 years, we've been stuffing our developers with more tools, more tools, more tools, more tools. Now where we are with developers having 20 tools and blocking them from actually working.
Yeah,
So we believe the developers and DevOps they have a place in the security kind of pipeline, but they're not the first ones to actually build the strategy. I think they're the recipients of the policy, and when they have something to fix, they fix it. But it doesn't start with the developers; it starts with the policy. Does that make sense?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I've talked to a lot of people about is that, as a developer, there's not much, you know, necessarily education or experience that comes with like writing secure code. And so a lot of people that I talk to, especially at large organizations, and you have many resources or teams, like you don't know which developers are good at writing secure code.
Yeah.
You have to have processes for you know making sure the code is secure as it's contributed and all of that. So it can't be at the bottom, right? It can't be
Yeah.
because you don't even know who has the capability. Not necessarily everyone needs to even have that level of you know granularity and experience.
Correct. Look at this example, Amir. We now live in the world where if you want to build a mobile or an application, you can hire one team, two external, third, four or five different development teams. And
Right.
these teams are not even part of your company. They're like they can be
Yeah.
contractors. And
Right.
empowering the technology that these teams are using is cloud because it's the only thing that can give them the velocity. Now,
Yeah.
how can you put the security strategy on a contractor developer team that doesn't understand your cloud security strategy, right? That's a big problem. Well, I was talking to a CISO last week, and they came to us and said, "Look, we have 1,600 developers building code every single day, and most of them are not part of our company. That
Yeah.
company cannot embrace a dev first approach to security because they're going to be in
Absolutely.
and out of developers. So for them, they came to us saying the only thing that works is a policy first approach.
Yeah. And if they tried to do it the other way, they'd lock themselves into something that's
Exactly.
not dynamic or adaptable. I was thinking about this. It just popped in my head a few days ago. I was not. I wasn't around when it was like on-prem only. Time period of technology. But like, I would imagine if today uh, there was no cloud and it was on-prem servers only,
Mhm.
if you were sitting there and saying like, okay, we're going to have to deploy $2 million, this is going to be a long-term commitment, we're going to have to do X, Y, and Z, and you sit there and think about it and have to commit to that, you have like a chance to kind of set these policies and think about them like at a more serious level versus like with this, you're kind of flying by the seat of your pants. You have this benefit of like you can change anything, you can like move to a different provider if you want to, like, at a reasonable speed. So
Yeah,
part of the ability to make those changes at high speed makes it hard to like sit down and say, stop everything for a second. Let's make an actual well thought out policy. Um,
correct. Correct. Yeah, you're 100%. I tell you, I have experience of actually going to the data center, sleeping overnight, and racking piece by piece and wire them, right? And I
wow.
remember the first thing you set up is a firewall. And once you set up the firewall, you set up your VPN rules. And once you set up your VPN rules, you set up who can come in. Then from the firewall, you put your router, your core, your edge, your servers. Like it's literally layer by layer in a more vertical way. Now, a developer cannot walk into the data center and unplug the firewall. It's impossible. Like that would never happen. They wouldn't even have
Right.
access to the data center. But when you move to the cloud and everything is horizontal, then everyone has access to your firewall. One person, engineer, and he could be great, sitting from their GitHub repo where they manage infrastructure as code, one line of code takes down the entire firewall.
Yeah.
And that's the problem we live with today. And there's no time. There's no time to stop everyone from building, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
So, our approach is how can we let them continue to go fast and do it from a whole nother perspective? And really, the innovation started there.
Yeah, that's an incredible point because honestly, like my thing that I keep repeating and my company's like kind of purpose is that like I've seen this shift from the initial attack vector being the system to being the individual, and like it's exactly for what you're talking about. Like if you get one engineer's like credentials and can like log into the server, you don't need to attack the system. You don't need to take over, attack directly. You just take that person's computer or email or whatever it happens to be.
100%. I read an article yesterday said only 0.4% of the attacks are by 0 day exploits. Like these
Yeah,
attackers are not being, they're not being very sophisticated or Hollywood, like I like to call them. They find the
exactly.
mistakes. They find the mistakes and they exploit the mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's at the end of the day, that's a business. They approach it as a business. So like they spend their time on what works and what's worth their time, not the stuff that, looks like the Matrix and like doing like,
Yeah.
Hollywood stuff. So
Mhm.
that's really interesting. So, talking about like the individual teams, like there's a lot of talk about how hard it is to hire good people. So many opportunities to get started entry level in cybersecurity, DevOps, SecOps, all of that. What do you think's going on with like the employment and recruiting world? Like why are the teams burnt out and like all of that? What's going on the human resource side?
So, I think directly talking from experience on security teams, they're fatigue, they're alert fatigue, they're tools fatigue, they're decision making fatigue, right? You start building this security teams and then you plug 25 tools and the tools are generating so many alerts, they're not looking at them anymore, right? And that was one of the big thing why we went with policy first, because we believe that if the policy is approved by the business and can traverse through data and is accurate enough that generates a violation that you don't want that violation to be generated, that alert is not a false positive, right? And what we're really trying to do here is to eliminate false positives. Like go and be very accurate on the results by eliminating false positive and not burn these teams out.
Right.
The answer is not more people and more tools. The answer is to start looking at this completely different, one, and from a research perspective is to make sure that we do have individuals that are coming to the organization that also embrace innovation and they can be agnostic to anything to understand how to evaluate tools and how to look at these tools. And there's a lot of challenges CISOs are traversing today, and I know I don't envy to be in their spot today. And I know their struggles every single day, and they don't go to sleep knowing that any day it could happen. It could happen any day. And that it's something that I feel high amount of empathy for. And that honestly, that's why I fight every single day to bring a solution to them that helps them sleep very well.
That's awesome.